Welcome to Facts Radio, your journey through history begins here. In this episode, we explore the story of Chernobyl, a moment when human ambition collided with the raw forces of nature and science. It's a story of engineers and firemen, of invisible danger, of courage and confusion, of silence and memory. On a quiet April night in 1986, deep in the forests of northern Ukraine, a reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, and the world would never be the same again. Imagine the hum of machinery, the blue glow of control room panels, the smell of metal and dust. Imagine a night that begins as a routine test and ends as a catastrophe felt across continents. Over the next hour, we'll move through the timeline of that night, the chaos that followed, the people who faced it, and the legacy that endures today. This is not just a history lesson. It's a journey, through fear and heroism, through silence and resilience. So, close your eyes if you can. Picture the distant flicker of lights in Pripyat, the laughter of children before dawn, and the explosion that shattered it all. Chapter 1: The Dream of Atomic Progress. The Soviet Union of the 1970s and 80s lived in an age of technological confidence. Nuclear energy was not just science, it was pride, proof that the USSR stood at the frontiers of modernity. The Chernobyl plant, located about 130 kilometers north of Kiev, was one of many RBMK 1000 reactors, vast graphite-moderated machines designed to generate enormous power for millions of homes. Pripyat, the nearby city built for plant workers, was a showcase of that optimism. Founded in 1970, it was filled with apartment blocks, schools, stores, and parks. Families were proud to live there. It was considered a model Soviet city, clean, youthful, modern. The average age of residents was under 30. There were cinemas, cafes, sports facilities, and a Ferris wheel waiting for the May Day celebrations just a week away. Inside the plant, each of the 4 reactors was capable of producing 1,000 megawatts of electric power. The RBMK design, however, carried flaws. Its graphite moderator and control rods made it unstable at low power. Operators understood its quirks but not its full dangers. A 5th and 6th reactor were under construction, a sign that the future looked bright. Workers were proud. Many called Chernobyl the heart of Soviet energy. Few would have imagined that within a decade, the name would symbolize something entirely different: disaster. The Soviet dream was tied to control, over nature, over technology, over the atom itself. But control is an illusion when knowledge is incomplete and communication is filtered through politics. Beneath the confidence of engineers lay an undercurrent of haste, cost-cutting, and secrecy, habits born of a system that prized results over caution. The world outside had little idea how this design worked, or how vulnerable it could be. For those living in Pripyat, the plant was a good neighbor. Its glow on the horizon at night was familiar, almost comforting. No one feared it. Why should they? Nuclear energy was progress, and progress, they were told, could not fail. Chapter 2: The Night of the Test. April 25, 1986. The night was mild, calm. Spring had arrived early. At Reactor 4, engineers prepared for a safety test, one designed to see how long the turbines could keep generating electricity after a power loss. The idea was simple: if the plant ever lost external power, could the momentum of the spinning turbines provide enough energy to keep coolant pumps running until diesel generators started? It was a test postponed several times before. Everyone wanted it done. Supervisors pressed for completion. That evening, the reactor's power output began to drop as part of the procedure. But a series of small delays, some involving the regional power grid, stretched the process deep into the night. By the time the operators were ready to continue, their shift was tired, and the power level had fallen dangerously low. In an effort to stabilize it, the crew withdrew too many control rods, the very instruments designed to absorb neutrons and regulate the reaction. The reactor became unstable, its balance delicate. Still, the test proceeded. Instructions were vague, communication was imperfect. In the early hours of April 26, around 1:23 a.m., the test began. What followed was a chain of reactions no one could stop. Within seconds, the reactor's power surged to more than 100 times its intended level. Fuel rods shattered. Water flashed into steam. The pressure blew the 1,000-ton reactor lid into the air. A column of fire, black smoke, and radioactive debris shot skyward. The building shook as two explosions tore through the reactor hall. Inside the control room, lights flickered and alarms screamed. Some operators thought the reactor was intact, others knew instantly something impossible had occurred. They had been trained to trust instruments, not instincts, and the instruments failed. Within minutes, fires broke out across the roof. Burning graphite blocks glowed orange in the darkness. The night shift chief, Alexander Akimov, tried desperately to pump water into the destroyed core, unaware that the core itself was no longer contained. Imagine the confusion, the heat, the disbelief. A system designed to demonstrate safety had become a self-inflicted disaster. Chapter 3: The First Responders. At 1:30 a.m., the first fire trucks arrived. They were local crews, stationed nearby. None of them knew what they were running into. They saw flames leaping from the roof, the night sky lit with strange colors. They smelled burning metal and something unfamiliar: ozone, graphite, radiation itself. Firefighters climbed ladders and sprayed water into the wreckage. Some walked directly onto the roof, where pieces of the reactor's graphite lay glowing like coals. Within minutes, their boots began to melt. Their skin itched and burned. They felt metallic tastes in their mouths, the first symptoms of acute radiation exposure. To them, this was simply a fire. They had fought chemical blazes, electrical ones, industrial accidents. They didn't know that invisible particles were streaming through their bodies, damaging cells, poisoning bone marrow. In the control room, attempts continued to cool the reactor. Valves turned, pumps roared, but nothing worked. No one yet understood the scale. Even as radiation monitors spiked beyond their limits, reports described the situation as manageable. The plant's management called Moscow, trying to sound calm. Outside, people gathered on bridges and balconies. Pripyat residents could see the strange blue glow above the reactor, caused by ionized air. It looked beautiful, eerie. Some even took their children out to watch. They laughed quietly, thinking it was a fire drill or an accident under control. They could not have known that the air itself was lethal. By dawn, dozens of firefighters and workers were suffering from nausea, vomiting, dizziness. They were taken to the local hospital. Doctors there had never seen radiation sickness before. The men's faces reddened, blistered, their eyes burned. Yet they remained stoic. They had done their duty. They believed the worst was over. But the invisible cloud above them had only just begun its journey. Chapter 4: Pripyat Awakens. April 26, 1986. Morning. The city of Pripyat stirred like any other day. School children prepared for classes, families went shopping, weddings were held. The explosion at the plant had been visible from almost everywhere in town, but officials said nothing. There was no warning, no announcement. Imagine living 3 kilometers from the most radioactive spot on Earth and not knowing it. By noon, radiation levels in parts of the city were tens of thousands of times higher than normal. Some policemen noticed headaches, metallic taste, nausea. Parents noticed children becoming sick. Still, life continued. The Ferris wheel in the park stood waiting for the May Day celebration that would never come. Doctors at the local hospital were overwhelmed. Firemen, engineers, security staff arrived with burns and strange symptoms. The hospital staff had no protective gear. Nurses handled contaminated clothing with bare hands. The contamination spread silently from one room to another. Meanwhile, in Kiev, government officials debated how to respond. The Soviet Union's instinct was secrecy. They feared panic, political embarrassment, and international scrutiny. Local leaders were ordered not to speak. It wasn't until 36 hours after the explosion that buses began to arrive for evacuation. Residents were told it was temporary, that they'd be gone only a few days. Families packed light. Children carried their favorite toys. cats and dogs were left behind. The evacuation convoy stretched for miles. As buses rolled out, radiation monitors clicked furiously. Soldiers in masks stood by, guiding traffic. No one told the evacuees that they would never return. Pripyat fell silent, an entire city emptied in a single afternoon. Laundry hung on balconies. Meals sat half-eaten. The clock in the town square kept ticking. Chapter 5: The World Finds Out. While the Soviet Union tried to contain the news, radiation didn't respect borders. On April 28, instruments at a nuclear plant in Sweden detected abnormal levels of radioactivity. Scientists there traced the wind patterns and realized the source was somewhere in the Soviet Union. The world's press began to ask questions. Moscow finally admitted that an incident had occurred at Chernobyl. Only days later did the truth start to emerge, that a reactor had exploded and released massive amounts of radiation. By then, radioactive clouds had passed over Belarus, Poland, Scandinavia, and Western Europe. In some places, rain carried contamination to the ground. Farmers were told not to use milk or vegetables. In parts of the UK and Austria, sheep grazing restrictions lasted for years. For the Soviet government, it was a public relations nightmare. For ordinary people, it was an awakening. The myth of total control, of technological mastery, shattered overnight. In Ukraine and Belarus, hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated from contaminated villages. Entire regions were marked as exclusion zones. Soldiers cordoned off roads. Buses transported families to temporary housing far away. Many never saw their homes again. Imagine the silence that followed: fields, forests, houses abandoned. The laughter of children replaced by the whisper of wind through empty windows. The invisible dust of cesium, iodine, and strontium settled on the soil, the water, the grass. Its half-life measured not in days, but decades. Chapter 6: The Liquidators. The clean-up operation that followed was unprecedented in human history. Hundreds of thousands were mobilized: engineers, soldiers, doctors, and volunteers. They called it the Battle of Chernobyl. Their mission: contain the radiation, prevent further explosions, and stabilize the reactor ruins. Helicopters dropped sand, lead, and boron into the burning core. Bulldozers buried contaminated soil. Soldiers washed buildings and streets with chemicals. Even the topsoil was stripped away. It was a war fought not with bullets, but with shovels, gas masks, and courage. One of the most dangerous missions was performed by the biorobots, men sent to clear radioactive debris from the reactor roof after the actual robots failed from radiation damage. Each man was allowed only 40 seconds on the roof. They ran out, shoveled debris, and ran back. Some received fatal doses in less than a minute. Then came the miners. To prevent the molten core from reaching groundwater, Soviet engineers ordered a tunnel dug beneath the reactor. Thousands of miners from across the USSR worked in blistering heat, with little protection, knowing their lives were on the line. They saved millions by preventing another explosion. It's easy to talk about statistics, sieverts, Curies, and contamination zones, but behind each number was a person. The cleanup workers, the liquidators, often worked with inadequate protection and incomplete information. Many would later fall ill. Thousands died from radiation-induced diseases, though exact numbers remain disputed. Yet, they accomplished the impossible: they stopped Chernobyl from becoming a global extinction-level event. Their effort was raw human determination against the unstoppable force of physics. And in the end, they won, though at a terrible cost. Chapter 7: Building the Sarcophagus. Containment was essential. The reactor continued to emit radiation, and rain threatened to wash contamination deeper into the soil. Soviet engineers designed an enormous steel and concrete shell, a sarcophagus, to encase the destroyed reactor. Construction began within months, under harrowing conditions. Radiation levels were so high that workers could only stay for minutes at a time. Sections were prefabricated and lifted into place by cranes operated from behind lead-lined cabins. Some parts had to be welded manually, with workers rotating every few minutes to avoid lethal exposure. By November 1986, the sarcophagus was complete, 200,000 tons of steel and concrete sealing the radioactive remains inside. It was a feat of human determination, built in record time. But it was never meant to last forever. The structure leaked. Moisture corroded its beams. Birds nested inside. Scientists worried that another collapse could release radioactive dust again. Decades later, an international project designed a new solution, the new safe confinement, a vast arch taller than the Statue of Liberty, built to slide over the original sarcophagus. Completed in 2016, it now covers the site, ensuring that Chernobyl remains isolated for at least the next century. This was humanity's final gesture of control, building a tomb for the atom's fury. But beneath that steel shell still lies the molten core, a mixture of uranium, graphite, and sand known as corium, or the elephant's foot. It remains deadly even now, silently resting in the dark. Chapter 8: Lessons from Chernobyl. Chernobyl changed the world's relationship with nuclear power. Countries began re-evaluating their safety standards, reactor designs, and emergency response systems. The Soviet RBMK reactor type was gradually phased out or modified with new safety mechanisms. International organizations like the IAEA strengthened global cooperation on nuclear safety. Transparency became the new doctrine, because the cost of silence was now clear. The world realized that a single error, a single lie, could devastate entire continents. In popular culture, Chernobyl became a ghost that haunted generations. Films, books, and documentaries captured the fear, the heroism, and the mistakes. The 2019 HBO miniseries revived public interest, revealing human stories behind the statistics, stories of courage, guilt, and truth. For the survivors, however, the lessons were deeply personal. Thousands still live with illnesses caused by radiation exposure. Many villages remain uninhabitable. And yet, some elderly residents returned, unable to leave their land behind. They live quietly among the ruins, tending gardens and raising animals, defiantly reclaiming their homes. Chernobyl isn't just a story of science gone wrong. It's a story about responsibility, truth, and the limits of human control. It forces us to ask, how much risk are we willing to take in pursuit of progress? Chapter 9: Nature reclaims the ruins. Today, nearly 4 decades after the explosion, the exclusion zone is one of the most unexpected sanctuaries of wildlife in Europe. Wolves, lynxes, bears, and eagles roam the forests. Elk graze in the overgrown meadows of Pripyat. The absence of humans has allowed nature to flourish. Scientists call it the Chernobyl paradox, a place too radioactive for people, yet thriving with life. Radiation persists, but so does resilience. The animals adapt, and generations are born that know no fear of humans. In a strange way, the planet has begun to heal itself. Walking through the zone now, you hear birdsong where once there was only silence. Trees rise through apartment blocks. The Ferris wheel of Pripyat stands rusted but beautiful, a symbol of both loss and renewal. Chernobyl has become more than a warning. It's a lesson in humility. Nature doesn't forget, but it forgives. Life endures even where humans have failed. The irony is profound. In the ruins of humanity's greatest mistake, nature has found a way to return. Closing summary. The story of Chernobyl is not just about radiation or catastrophe, it's about truth, courage, and the fragile balance between progress and responsibility. It's a story written in ash, but remembered in light. Imagine standing in the empty streets of Pripyat, wind moving through broken windows, the sound of leaves where laughter once echoed. It's haunting, but it's also hopeful. Because what remains is not just a scar, but a reminder of our capacity to rebuild, to learn, and to care. Chernobyl taught us that the price of ignorance is far greater than the cost of caution. That human lives are more than numbers, and that our quest for power must never outpace our wisdom. And in the quiet forests of the exclusion zone, where wolves hunt and wild horses run free, there is proof of resilience. Life goes on. The earth remembers, but it heals. This has been Chernobyl, all you need to know. Thank you for listening all the way through. To support the show and ensure we can continue, please take a moment to subscribe.